Every year you go for your checkup, trusting you're doing everything right. But what if a test ordered with the best intentions could become the one thing that harms you? Let me tell you a story about a woman named Carol.
It's a story that's quietly playing out in homes all across the country. It's about the subtle intrusion of fear and the journey back to confidence. For Carol, her garden wasn't just a patch of dirt, it was her sanctuary. At 74, she knew the language of the soil, the secrets of the sun. Her hands, though weathered, were steady, her mind sharp. But one Tuesday, as she reached to prune a prize-winning rose, the world tilted. Not a dramatic fall, but a sudden, nauseating wave of dizziness that made the brilliant reds and greens of her garden blur into a meaningless watercolor. Her breath caught in her throat. Her hand, the one that had held children and grandchildren with such certainty, trembled as she gripped the trellis for support. It was over in 30 seconds, but it left behind a chilling residue. It was a silent, unwelcome whisper that said, "You are no longer in control." This wasn't just a dizzy spell. It was a thief, stealing the bedrock of her confidence. Carol was a retired librarian. Her life had been built on the beautiful, reliable order of things. She organized books, thoughts, and a loving family with the same gentle precision. Her pride wasn't in grand achievements, but in the small, consistent joys. Reading a story to her 7-year-old grandson, William, without stumbling. Her weekly 3-mile walk with her best friend, Sarah, where they solved the world's problems. And of course, her garden. But after that first dizzy spell, and a few more that followed, a fog of anxiety began to roll in. The fear of another episode was dismantling the woman in that photograph, piece by piece. The walks became shorter. The story times were filled with a new hesitation, a fear that the words might blur on the page, or that her voice might waver. The erosion was quiet, almost invisible to everyone else, but for Carol, it was a daily battle. Later that week, after a series of routine checkups and tests that all came back normal, she sat alone in the quiet of her living room. There was a stack of glossy medical brochures on the side table, information on blood pressure, cholesterol, preventative screenings. They were meant to be reassuring. Instead, a single, devastating thought crystallized in her mind, a thought so heavy it felt like it could crush her. She thought, the very steps I am taking to keep myself safe. What if they are the things that are secretly breaking me? It was the fear that the system she trusted, the checkups, the tests, the advice, was a maze with hidden traps. It was in that moment of despair that she saw it. A single, perfect rose, bathed in moonlight, standing tall against the darkness. It was a symbol of her own resilience, a life that had weathered storms and still knew how to bloom. And something shifted. It wasn't a sudden miracle, but a quiet, firm decision. She would no longer be a passive passenger in her own health journey. She would become the navigator. Her new perspective was simple, but it changed everything. Knowledge is not about blindly following. It's about confidently questioning. Her next doctor's visit was different. We see her not as a patient, but as a partner, asking calm, pointed questions about a recommended scan. Is this absolutely necessary right now? Are there alternatives without contrast? Given my history, what are the specific risks for me? The conversation is one of mutual respect, and the payoff, it wasn't a magic pill. It was the deeply satisfying return of her life. We see her in the garden, kneeling in the dirt, her hands steady, a genuine, earned smile of relief on her face as she clips a perfect rose. We see her reading to William, her voice clear and confident, the sound of his delighted laughter filling the room. And finally, we see her on that long walk with Sarah, matching her stride for stride. Their conversation easy and full of life, the sun warming their faces. She wasn't just walking, she was moving forward. Carol's story isn't about rejecting modern medicine. Far from it. It's about engaging with it wisely. It's a reminder that after the age of 60, our bodies have a different story to tell, and our questions hold more power than we realize. You may have felt that same flicker of doubt, that same sense that something isn't quite right, even when you're told everything is fine. You trust your doctor, you follow the recommendations, but, buried in the fine print of even the most routine procedures, are silent risks that no one warns you about.
What if I told you that a test to check your arteries could actually lead to a surgery that causes a stroke? Or that a simple dye injected to get a clearer picture could quietly place your entire cardiovascular system under dangerous stress? Over the next few minutes, we are going to navigate this maze together. We'll uncover 5 common medical tests that may carry hidden stroke risks, especially for seniors. We'll start with a cautionary tale about physical exertion, explore the shadows of sedation and contrast dyes, and build all the way to the ultimate revelation, a test so seemingly harmless you'd never suspect the dangerous path it could lead you down. Staying until the end is critical, because that final piece of knowledge is the one that could empower you to prevent a needless procedure and protect your health in a way you never thought possible. This is about turning you from a passive patient into the confident CEO of your own health. So if you're ready to ask better questions and protect yourself and your loved ones, make sure to subscribe. And just a quick important reminder, the information we're sharing today is for educational purposes to help you have more informed conversations. Please, always consult with your personal healthcare provider before making any significant changes to your health regimen. They know your unique history. Our goal is to empower you with the right questions to ask them. All right, let's begin with our first area of focus. Let's start with a procedure that, on the surface, sounds like a very smart idea. Our first cautionary checkpoint, the exercise stress test. You put on a heart monitor, you walk on a treadmill, and you see how your heart performs under pressure. It's a proactive step, right? For many, it is. But if you're over 60, especially with a history of high blood pressure, it can sometimes be a risky proposition. The very purpose of the test is to create strain. As the speed and incline increase, your heart rate shoots up and your blood pressure rises. For a healthy 40-year-old, this is a controlled challenge. For a senior with blood vessels that may have lost some of their youthful elasticity, it can be a sudden, intense shock to the system. The risk isn't just discomfort. In rare cases, it involves dangerous blood pressure spikes, sudden arrhythmias, or even tiny tears in fragile blood vessels, particularly in the brain. A 2020 study in the American Journal of Cardiology highlighted this. It looked at over 1,300 patients above age 65 who underwent treadmill stress tests and found that nearly 7% experienced adverse events during the test, like blood pressure surges. And the group most affected, those who already had vascular issues. To truly grasp the risk, let's use an analogy. Imagine your cardiovascular system is like a vintage classic car that you've cared for meticulously for decades. It runs beautifully for your daily drives. The exercise stress test is like taking that beloved classic car and suddenly flooring it on a racetrack, pushing the engine to its absolute redline. It might show you the engine's limit, but it also carries a very real risk of blowing a gasket or cracking a fragile aging hose. The test didn't necessarily cause the weakness, but it exposed it in the most aggressive way possible. Therefore, the key is not to avoid evaluation, but to choose the right evaluation. Before agreeing to a strenuous treadmill test, ask your doctor, is this test truly necessary right now, especially if I'm not having active symptoms? And more importantly, is there a safer way to evaluate my heart? For many seniors, options like a nuclear stress test, which uses medication to gently simulate exercise on the heart, or a simple resting echocardiogram, can provide excellent information without forcing that classic engine to redline. It's about getting the data without rattling the entire system. Now that's about physical stress, but what about the risks hidden in chemical assistance? That brings us to our second point, a deeper look at sedation's shadow, the endoscopy. Whether it's a colonoscopy or an upper endoscopy, these procedures are incredibly common and often recommended just to be safe, and they save lives. But if you're on certain common medications, the sedation involved can introduce a variable many people never consider. The issue isn't the camera or the scope itself. It's the combination of 3 factors: age, common medications, and sedation. Many, if not most people over 60 are on some form of blood thinner, even a daily low-dose aspirin. These medications do exactly what their name implies. They make your blood less prone to clotting. At the same time, when you are sedated, your blood pressure naturally drops and your circulation slows down. Now you have a perfect storm brewing, slower moving blood in a person whose blood is less able to clot. This can increase the risk for circulatory problems that might trigger what's known as a transient ischemic attack, or a TIA, often called a mini-stroke. A large-scale review in 2021 in the journal Gastrointestinal Endoscopy found that among patients over 65 who underwent these sedated procedures, there was a noticeable increase in TIAs within the 72 hours that followed. Let's use another analogy to make this crystal clear. Think of your circulatory system as the complex plumbing in an older, historic home. Your blood thinners are like adding a special agent to the water that makes it extra slippery, preventing any sediment from sticking together and causing a clog. But the sedation is like temporarily turning down the main water pressure for the whole house. When the flow becomes slow and sluggish, even with that slippery agent, it creates an opportunity for a small bit of debris to get stuck in a narrow pipe junction and briefly block the flow to a critical room, in this case, your brain. This doesn't mean you should fear a necessary endoscopy. It's a vital tool. Therefore, the solution is proactive communication. You must be your own best advocate. Before the procedure, have a detailed conversation with your doctor. Remind them of every single medication you take, especially blood thinners like warfarin, Plavix, or even daily aspirin. Ask them directly, given my age and my medications, what are the specific risks of sedation for me? Do I need to stop my blood thinner, and what is the protocol for that? In some cases, depending on the procedure, you can even ask if it can be performed with lighter sedation options. Knowledge of how these elements interact is your best defense. Next, let's stick with this theme of introducing chemicals into the body. This brings us to the hidden pressure of a clearer picture. The CT scan with contrast. If you've ever had a CT scan with contrast, you remember that warm, flushing feeling that spreads through your body. That's the dye helping your doctor see everything more clearly. It sounds wonderfully helpful, right? And it can be. But that injection can do more than just light up the images. For seniors, particularly those already managing high blood pressure, heart issues, or weakened kidneys, that contrast dye can put a sudden, silent stress on the cardiovascular system. In some people, it can trigger what's called a vasovagal reaction, where your heart rate and blood pressure suddenly drop, leading to fainting. However, in others, the exact opposite happens. The dye can cause a rapid spike in blood pressure, causing fragile blood vessels to tighten or spasm. When that happens in the delicate network of vessels leading to the brain, the risk of a stroke quietly creeps in. A study in the Journal of Vascular and Interventional Radiology confirmed this isn't just a theory. It found that older adults undergoing these scans, especially those with a history of hypertension or cardiovascular disease, had a significantly higher rate of vascular complications within 72 hours. This is one of those hidden risks we talked about. The procedure itself is painless, but the internal reaction can be profound. Think of it this way. Imagine your blood vessels are a network of old delicate garden hoses. A non-contrast CT scan is like running water through them at a normal, steady pressure to check for leaks. It's very safe. But a CT scan with contrast is like suddenly hooking up that network to a high-pressure fire hydrant. The powerful surge helps you spot even the tiniest weak spot, but it also puts immense stress on the entire system and could cause a weak section of hose to bulge or even burst. Consequently, your voice is, once again, your most important tool. When a CT with contrast is suggested, it's your turn to ask the critical questions. Is this contrast agent absolutely essential for what we're looking for? Is there a safer alternative, like a non-contrast CT or an ultrasound, that could give us enough information? And always, always share your full history, especially any kidney issues, heart conditions, or previous reactions to dyes. The goal is to get the clearest medical picture with the least amount of internal turbulence. Now we're going to build on that idea, looking at another imaging test with a similar sounding risk, but with a completely different mechanism. This is the lingering question of contrast agents, the MRI with gadolinium. MRIs are miraculous. They give us an incredibly detailed look deep inside the body. But like with CT scans, a contrast agent is often used to get even clearer images. The problem is, this agent is very different. And for seniors, the exit strategy from the body is just as important as the imaging itself. The contrast dye used in MRIs often contains a heavy metal called gadolinium. In a young, healthy person, the kidneys act like a powerful filtration system, quickly identifying this foreign substance and flushing it out of the body completely. But after age 60, Kidney function naturally begins to decline for almost everyone. If you have even mild undiagnosed kidney issues, your body may not be able to eliminate the gadolinium effectively. So, what happens to it? It can linger. Small amounts can be retained in the body, and this has been linked to a serious condition called nephrogenic systemic fibrosis, which involves hardening of the skin and tissues. But here's the part that is a deeply concerning secret risk. Studies have found retained gadolinium deposited in brain tissue. Researchers are now exploring its link to subtle neurological symptoms like confusion, brain fog, and dizziness, symptoms that can mimic or even point towards circulatory issues in the brain. A 2019 study in the journal Radiology tracked over 2,000 patients over 65 who received these scans. About 5% reported stroke-like symptoms within a week: headaches, blurred vision, balance problems. These weren't full-blown strokes, but they were red flags, and most of these patients had underlying kidney issues, whether they knew it or not. Our analogy here is crucial. Imagine your body is a pristine white porcelain sink, and your kidneys are the drain. The gadolinium contrast is like pouring a dark, potent ink into the sink to trace the flow of water. If the drain is wide open and working perfectly, the ink flushes out instantly, leaving no trace. However, if the drain is even slightly slow or clogged, as our kidneys can become with age, some of that ink doesn't wash away. It settles in the basin, leaving a lasting stain. That stain is the retained gadolinium, lingering where it doesn't belong. This means your defense is a simple blood test. If your doctor recommends an MRI with contrast, you have every right to say, "Before we do that, could we please check my kidney function?" A simple GFR blood test can tell you how well your drain is working. If contrast is still deemed necessary, knowing your kidney function allows the medical team to take extra precautions. And often you can and should ask, can we get the information we need without the contrast? The MRI itself is harmless. It's the lingering ink we need to be wary of. And now we arrive at the topic I promised you at the beginning, the one that to me is the most important of all. It's a test that is non-invasive, completely painless, and involves no dyes or exertion at all. And that is precisely why it is so dangerous. This is the ultimate revelation, when just checking becomes a gamble with the routine carotid artery ultrasound. Your doctor suggests it during a routine checkup. Let's just take a quick look at the arteries in your neck just to be thorough. It sounds like the smartest, safest, most preventative test in the world. But what if I told you that for people without symptoms, this simple, harmless test could start a chain reaction that ends in a devastating, life-altering stroke? Here's how it happens. The carotid arteries supply blood to your brain. As we age, it is perfectly normal for plaque, little buildups of cholesterol and calcium, to form in these arteries. An ultrasound might show some narrowing, say 50% or 60%. That number sounds terrifying. So your doctor, following protocol, refers you to a surgeon. The surgeon, looking at that number, may suggest a procedure to clean it out, either a carotid endarterectomy or a stent. It all sounds logical, but here is the vital truth that often gets lost. If you have no symptoms, no dizziness, no vision changes, no weakness, that plaque is often stable and harmless. It's just a normal sign of aging. The surgery to remove it, however, is not harmless. It is a major vascular procedure with very real risks, and the number one risk is dislodging a piece of that plaque during the procedure, sending it directly into the brain and causing the very stroke you were trying to prevent. A landmark study in the New England Journal of Medicine confirmed this. They followed thousands of seniors who had this kind of narrowing but no symptoms. They found that in many cases, surgery did not reduce stroke risk any more than simply managing the condition with medication and lifestyle changes. And worse, a percentage of patients suffered strokes as a direct result of the surgery itself. This is the ultimate medical paradox. To understand it, let's use our final, most important analogy. Imagine you have a wasp's nest on the side of your house. It's been there for years, it's dormant, and the wasps never come out. It's an asymptomatic nest. The routine ultrasound is like someone pointing a special camera at it and telling you, "Did you know that nest is 60% full of wasps?" The number is scary. Therefore, you hire someone to remove it. But the very act of trying to remove the nest poking it, spraying it, cutting it down, is what angers the wasps and causes them to swarm out and attack you. In many cases, the safest approach would have been to just leave the dormant nest alone and monitor it from a distance. This is why this revelation is so critical. If your doctor suggests a carotid ultrasound and you have zero symptoms, it is your right and your responsibility to become a critical thinker. Ask, why are we doing this test? If we find some normal age-related narrowing, what is the proposed plan? Is it not safer to manage my health with medication and watch it over time? If a scan has already shown narrowing, do not panic. Seek a second opinion before even considering surgery. For asymptomatic narrowing, watchful waiting is often the safest and wisest course of action. This is the ultimate case where doing less can mean so much more for your health and safety. And there you have it. We've journeyed through these 5 routine tests, uncovering the hidden risks that often go unmentioned. From our first cautionary checkpoint with the stress test, through the chemical shadows of sedation and contrast dyes, all the way to the ultimate revelation, that the safest seeming test can sometimes lead us down the riskiest path. Each piece of knowledge is a tool, empowering you to move from being a passenger to being the co-pilot in your own healthcare. It's not about fear, it's about wisdom. Now I'd love to hear from you. Which of these insights resonated with you the most? Was it the idea of the body as a classic car, the plumbing in an old house, or that dormant wasp's nest? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's learn from each other. If you found this journey valuable, please give this video a thumbs up. It truly helps our community grow. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into senior health. Until next time, stay healthy, stay curious, and remember that your questions are your greatest power.